right, so let's start. All right, so just as mentioned before, on Wednesday, what we really covered is pretty much what is a linear equation. We figured out that if you have a linear equation, you're going to get a linear graph, which is just a straight line. And then we practice changing things to standard form. Now, standard form is just a very specific strategy that you guys could use in order to graph linear equations. Now, just like anything else, this is a tool that's beneficial for certain situations. Starting on Monday, we're going to figure out, or we're going to really study different ways of graphing in different forms. Now, depending on what equation I give you, some forms are going to be, or more strategies are going to be more beneficial. And that's what the goal is of this unit, is to pretty much give you several strategies. So that way, when you recognize an equation as linear, you could use strategies in order to graph them faster and quicker and more efficiently. So let's get started. So graphing linear lines in standard form. Since 2 points determine a line, one way to graph a linear equation or a function is to find 2 points at which the graph intersects the x-axis and the y-axis. So pretty much what we're doing here is we know that if we recognize a equation that is a linear equation, we know it's going to produce a straight line. Now, all you need to do to really draw a line are 2 points, because if you know 2 points on a line, all you have to do is obviously draw the line across them, and that is exactly what we are going to pretty much do with these two, with graphing in standard form. Now, keep in mind that we're not going to just choose any 2 points, which we can. If we really wanted to, we can be like, okay, my favorite number is 5. How do I find its ordered pair? Remember the first week we practiced this. All you have to do is plug in that 5 value in for x. And then you go ahead and solve for y to figure out what y is equal. But again, let's be purposeful and let's be a little bit more, I guess, just like I said, purposeful in choosing certain numbers that are going to help us out. And what I'm trying to get at here is always try to, if you're in standard form, if you recognize something that's somewhat in standard form, always use the following strategy. Choose 2 points and graph them in order to make a line, in order to draw a line through those points. So let's do a little bit of background. An x-axis is the horizontal line going across. Now, if we're looking for the x-intercept and we're looking at the x-axis, what is my y value no matter what, if any point exists on this line? And I believe the y value would always be 0. So what we're going to do here in order to find our x-axis is we're going to plug in a 0 in for y and then solve for its x. Now, keep in mind that we're also going to switch it up, and we're also going to do that for the y, with the y-intercept. Now, let's go ahead and zone in on our y-axis. If I have any point on this y-axis here, what does my x always equal? And you can see here that your x is always going to be equal to 0. So that's why I put this little table here, just to kind of help you. And even if I don't have a table, I always do it because it kind of helps me get off the ground, so to speak. So more of the story here, notice that I have an equation. That equation is in standard form. My x and y are on the same side. My a is positive, etc., etc. So I'm going to go ahead and choose 2 points in order to graph them and to be able to draw my straight line. Now, before we go on, again, remember, I chose 0 for x to find my y-intercept, and I chose a 0 for my y to find the x-intercept. So let's go ahead and find the y-intercept first. And let's go ahead and plug in a 0. So this is 3 times x minus 4 times y is equal to 12. 3 times my x, a value of 0, because remember, I'm plugging it in to figure out what the value of y is. And then I rewrote everything else the same. Now, go ahead and figure out, okay, what do I got to do? I have to solve for y. Now, check this out. 3 times 0 is always 0. So you can really just cross that out and ignore it. And notice you're left with negative 4y is equal to 12. So let's go ahead and divide by negative 4 on both sides. You end up with y is equal to a negative 3. So you'll notice they're very, very straightforward. That's why standard form is nice. And that's why we practice putting equations into standard form, because they are very, very straightforward in terms of finding your x and y intercept. So if you go ahead, let me put green to show you that I'm really just finding the x-intercept now. I'm going to plug in a 0 in for y. And sometimes I literally just put a 0 over the y. You can see that's going to cross out. You're left with 3x is equal to 12. So you notice that this is actually a very speedy process. X is equal to a positive 4. So you know that now you have the x-intercept. And now you can actually even transfer those on the graph. The x-intercept for 0 is located right over here. The y-intercept, let me change the red to be a little bit more consistent. 0, -3 is located right over here. Remember that in order to draw a line, you really just need 2 points. So let's go ahead and draw the line. Now keep in mind, I'm trying to make this as best as possible. So if I'm not going to be straight, it's okay. But that line represents every x and y combination of my original equation. And you're good to go. And like we practiced before, graphing is really a skill that you're going to learn later. That's going to help you pretty much do other problems. So this is really just like a quick skill to get a visual representation. So yeah, that's one example. All right, so hopefully that was enough time to get the majority of this problem done. So first thing that I want you guys to kind of realize is notice that we're not just practicing a concept, we're pretty much practicing seeing a specific situation to apply that concept. So when I look at number 2, what I really see is an equation that's in standard form. So that clicks something in my brain that, okay, whenever I see something that's in standard form or something really close, I'm going to try to find 2 points in order to plot those 2 points to be able to graph my line. Now, keep in mind here that I'm going to choose very specific points, and I always plug in a 0 for my x and my y because those are very purposeful points, not only in terms of x and y axis as graphs, but they're really easy because notice if we were to plug in a 0 in for x, I'm going to do that right here. 2 times 0 is 0, so you can really just scratch it out, and you notice you're left with 5y is equal to 10. Go ahead, solve for y. You're left with y is equal to a positive 2. So you have found your y-intercept, y equals 2, which if you were to graph it, would be represented with that coordinate point just right there. Now let's go ahead and find the x-intercept. So it's pretty much the same thing, except this time we're plugging a 0 in for y. 5 times 0 is 0, you're left with 2x is equal to 10. Dividing by 2 on both sides, x is equal to a positive 5. So just like that, you have found your x and your y-intercept. Don't forget to plot them. That's the best accuracy that I can do at the moment. And go ahead and draw my straight line. So again, is this strategy always going to be useful or the most useful? No, but in terms of covering linear equations and graphing them, this is a good point to start because it's a little more straightforward. You just got to make sure you get the practice down in order to solve them. Now, if we look at number 3, notice that we have something in almost standard form, but I have those 1/2. So the first thing I'm going to do in order to graph this equation is I'm going to get rid of those fractions. Remember, we've been practicing how to get rid of fractions, just multiply by the numerator. These numerators cancel out, you're left with a single x plus a single y is equal to a positive 8. And you can see just like that, it's in standard form. And if it's in standard form, we know how to graph it actually quite easily. Let's go ahead and find our y-intercept. So we're plugging in the 0 for x. These cancel out. Notice you're left with y is equal to 8. Now, I'm not sure if I could go backwards. Let me see. Yep. You can erase or just write it twice on your paper. It doesn't really matter. But we figured out it was 8. If we find the x-intercept, 0 in for y cancels out. Notice that you're also left with an 8. So if you were to graph these, here's my 8, here's my 8. My line would look something like that. Keep in mind that I totally blew it and missed that point. But the moral of the story is, of course, is that that's the general line, and that's it. So again, this is all we're going to practice today. It's just pretty much how to graph lines. Now, one thing that a lot of students confuse is what the directions are telling you in the sense of what to do or what is required. Now, if you have something like this that says, hey, graph the following line, but put the equation in standard form, you have to put the equation in standard form first. But if they're telling you to find the x and y-intercept or to tell you just to graph it, you don't have to really worry about putting in a standard form first. So if you have problems like number 1 and 2, and notice that they're not really telling you to put them in standard form. They're just telling you to find the x and the y-intercept. Or if I told you to graph these, don't worry about putting them in standard form, but just worry about applying the same strategies. For instance, if I look at number 1, I have 2x plus 10 is equal to 5y. My x and my y are not on the same side, but I technically don't have to worry about it too much in terms of finding my x and y. Now, I'm just going to create a table to help me visually see what I'm trying to do. Now, in order to find my y-intercept, I'm going to plug in a 0 in for x. So here's my 0 in for x. These cancel out. Notice I'm left with 10 is equal to 5y. Dividing by 5 on both sides, you're left with 2 is equal to y. And now you have found your y-intercept. So keep in mind that you don't have to put it in standard form in order to figure out or to answer the question. You could also just kind of just do the strategy without standard form. So if you're finding the x-intercept, let's plug in a 0 in for y. Well, this y is 0. 5 times 0 is 0. Notice you're left with 2x plus 10 is equal to 0. Minusing 10 on both sides, you're left with 2x is equal to a negative 10. Dividing by 5, dividing by 2 gives you 5. So notice that x is equal to a negative 5. Sorry for it being so sloppy there. So you can see there that there were a little bit more, how would I say this? I just want to make sure to ensure that you're reading directions to figure out what they are asking you. If they're telling you standard form, you have to put it in standard form. But if they're just telling you information that you don't have to, I guess, so to speak. So just do one more.
Wait, what are you substituting with? Sorry.
What am I substituting?
Yeah.
Well, what I'm substituting here, and this is why I make this little little chart here. I'm putting in 0 in for x because if I plug in 0 for x, its y is always going to be my y-intercept. And then I'm going to substitute in 0 for y to find my x-intercept. And that just comes from knowing that if I ever have a y-intercept, my x is always going to be 0. And
that's
if
what I wanted to make sure.
Yeah, no worries at all, because technically you can choose whatever values you want to find 2 points, but you want to be purposeful. X and y intercepts are always nice to see on a graph, and they're easy when dealing with zeros, especially if you're multiplying like the problem set we have. So purpose is like key here, I guess. So yeah, so try number 2. Keep in mind it's only telling you to find the x and the y intercept. So think about this in the sense of, okay, all I need to do is find my x and my y intercept. How am I going to do that? Well, 0 in for x, 0 in for y, solve those separately. So I'll give you guys probably, I don't know, a couple minutes, and then we will go over it, and then we'll get some practice in. So hopefully that was enough time to get at least a good start. Now let's double check to make sure they're going down the right path. So again, notice that I have this kind of ugly looking linear equation. So, all right, the directions are not asking me to put it in standard form. They're just asking to find the x and the y intercept. So I could automatically go forward and just plug in the 0 for my x, plug in a 0 for my y, and find those separately. Now, if you feel comfortable changing this to standard form, feel free to do so. If you feel like, okay, this is an easy process, it helps me solve the problem better, or I just prefer to, make sure you do that. So that way it, you're setting yourself up for success. So I'm going to go ahead and plug in a 0 for my x first. Now I'm just going to write it over. I can see that 6 times 0 is 0, so those cancel out. I'm left with a negative 3y plus 12 is equal to 0. Now I could just solve my equation. So let's go ahead and minus 12 on both sides. Negative 3y is equal to a negative 12. Dividing by negative 3, I can see that y is equal to a positive 4. All right, so like I said, very straightforward. It's kind of easy to deal with zeros, or at least multiplying with zeros, because they always just multiply out. So let's go ahead and do the same thing with finding x-intercept. So we're plugging in a 0 in for y. Now these are going to divide out. Notice you're left with 6x plus 12 is equal to 0. Sorry for that x, I'm going to minus 12 on both sides. 6x is equal to a negative 12. Dividing by 6 on both sides, you end up with x is equal to a negative 2. So we can see here, if we were to graph these, it would be pretty convenient points, and we'd be able to draw a line through them. But the directions didn't ask this, so why do more than we have to?